A Quiet Place Part 2. Let's talk about it. Alright, so I know this review is kind of late, but so is the movie, so give me a break. I will be talking about some spoiler stuff from the first movie, but this would be an overall spoiler-free talk of the second movie. If you haven't seen the first movie, recommend you check that one out, and come back watch this review, and then watch Quiet Place Part 2. Alright, so it was nice being back in theaters. I'm really happy that John Krasinski made a decision to hold off until this movie could be seen in theaters because it really should be experienced that way. The overall sound design is necessary to be appreciated in the theater. So I want to talk about the intro first. Intro was really great, seeing the contrast of day one in the beginning of this movie compared to where the Abbott family kind of had a feel for things and how to scavenge through the town without making noise, compared to where they were just before the creatures arrive on Earth. There's a scene early on where it kind of shows John Krasinski walking through the same store from the first movie, except he's making a bunch of noise. I think it's just really funny. Seeing his reaction where he just rips the bag off without any concern of how loud it is when he's grabbing produce. I have a feeling if that happened now, he'd be like, "Almost there, honey. Just a few more knots. It should be done in 20 minutes." Another early detail I like is a reminder that the Abbott family already knew sign language prior to the creature invasion. Their daughter Reagan, played by Millicent Simmons, is deaf, so therefore the entire family knows sign language. The family definitely has a huge advantage with being able to communicate with each other without making sound. There's one scene in the movie with the two characters, Evelyn the mother, Marcus the son, where she's giving him words of encouragement through sign. It kind of we know that, that they sign to their daughter to communicate, but I kind of like how the family has adapted so much to being using sign, even before the invasion, that they'd use that form of communication with family members that could hear. I thought that was a really cool detail, and it also just emphasizes how much of an advantage they have over most people during that time, because they can communicate without making noise. And that shows how huge of a deal it is when you see other characters who don't have that form of communication. A few examples of the sound design that I thought were really effective in this movie that is especially necessary to be seen in theaters to fully appreciate was the contrast between being in Reagan's world and the other characters. Whenever something was going on, whether the chaos in the background to cars flipping and the monsters being present, and the camera was on Reagan, it was quiet. You didn't hear anything. You were brought into her envelope. I loved how you had that contrast of being brought into her world, and then as soon as another character came by, for example, if her father ran by, you'd be immediately brought back into the world and you'd hear everything. People screaming, running in the streets, cars flipping, monsters chasing after people. The sound design and the contrast between these two moments is huge, and it really helps you appreciate what it's like being in these two characters' worlds. So, this is covered in the trailer, so this isn't really a spoiler, but after the really cool intro seeing, day one just before the creatures arrive to when they arrive, we're brought right back to where A Quiet Place Part 1 ended, which is the Abbott family at their destroyed home. Trying to find others in a new place for refuge, they literally go on uncharted territory. There's a moment in the trailer where it shows them walking on their sand trail, and the trail ends, and they're getting ready to walk on uncharted territory. I can't talk much further than this because none of the trailers really cover much of anything, but I will say that all the characters in the movie are fantastic. I love Emily Blunt's character once again, but the standout for me is Millicent Simmons as Reagan. I also really liked Cillian Murphy in this movie as well. The few movies I've seen him in, I just kind of had it stuck that he was just kind of this really good at playing these creepy stalkerish type characters.
Would you like to see my mask?
So seeing him play in this movie was really refreshing, and it was really well done. He was an excellent addition to this cast. Everyone else was great, but the standouts for me were definitely Millicent Simmons and Cillian Murphy. One of the downsides was I loved Emily Blunt in the first movie, and I love her here, but I feel like she takes a little bit more of a lesser role in this movie. At some point, our characters kind of split up, and I feel like some characters get a better role than the others. It's kind of like an A and B plot going on, and the B plot was still good, but I was more interested and engaged into the A plot. And at some point in this movie, it gives me like The Last of Us vibes, but in a good way. From what the trailers were showing, I was a little concerned that the movie was going to be predictable, just kind of like, okay, we dealt with the monsters, so now it's the people we have to worry about. But fortunately, the movie isn't quite as predictable as that, and the ways that they end up handling it are actually well done. All in all, I thought this was a really good movie, not quite as good as the first. My score for it will be a very solid 8.2 out of 10. And yes, it is definitely worth seeing in theaters. See it while you can in theaters, because this movie really should be experienced in theaters to really appreciate the unique sound design and the cinematography. Speaking of cinematography, I love a lot of the long takes. I don't think I mentioned this earlier, but particularly in the intro, there's a lot of good long takes. I love where you can actually feel you're in there with the characters. Other movies that do this really well were like Children of Men and Creed, and it's done really well here as well, and I was really happy to see this in an IMAX experience. I will be reviewing more games and movies like this as well. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Please be a little wary of spoilers in the comments though. Alright, thanks guys. See you next time.